What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we will be breaking down all the main card fights on this weekend's UFC Fight Night, Brunson versus Holland, from a betting perspective. We'll be taking a deep dive into these matchups and hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions. And don't forget, if you would like to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights, which I won't have time to cover in this video, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. On there you'll find 5 to 10 minute breakdown videos for all the other matchups on this card that will be posted throughout the week right up until Saturday. And within this video we're actually going to be using a decent amount of fight footage to kind of show you some key points in the matchups that I'm going to be covering, because the great thing about some of these main card fights is that it actually features a lot of debutants or fighters who have only just come into the UFC recently, so we can use a good amount of footage from them before they came into the UFC to kind of illustrate some of the points I want to make in breaking down these matchups. Now, unfortunately, the YouTube copyright algorithm is crazy aggressive, which means the probability of this video getting copyright flagged is very, very high. So I do apologize if throughout this video I have to black out certain sections of the footage to beat the YouTube algorithm. But if you would like to watch the unedited versions of these videos, you can also head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, where the footage won't be blacked out and you'll be able to see the breakdowns exactly as I intend them to be seen. And also, if this video does come out crazy late, it's probably the YouTube copyright algorithm to blame, because it'll mean I'll have to kind of edit this video and upload it a few times to try and get past that algorithm. But hopefully, because a lot of the footage is kind of from really small promotions, we should be good, and I should still be able to use a decent amount of footage in this video. Now, I want to kick things off by saying a big thank you to everyone that watches my videos, hits that like button, leaves a comment, or subscribes to my channel. It means a lot. I really appreciate it. And just last week, we actually hit a milestone for the channel. We broke 5,000 subscribers. So if you're watching this, big fat thank you. I really appreciate your support. And we put out a 5,000 subscriber special video where I kind of talk about how our performance is going, or has been going recently, in terms of betting, our profits, our losses, and my plans for the future. So big thank you to everyone that's watched that. Big thank you to everyone that's left a nice friendly comment on it as well. The comments are amazing. I love you all, and I'm going to be replying to every single one of you individually tomorrow as well, once I'm done researching this card. And yeah, man, I just really appreciate all of you who come here every week, take time out of your day to watch the video, you know, leave a like, you know, comment on the videos. It means a lot, more than you could know. I don't want to go into that in too much detail here, otherwise this video will be really long, but I talk about things, you know, how you guys make me feel and how appreciative I am of your support in that video. So if you haven't seen it yet, go and check it out. And it's that stage of the video where I usually talk about doing a business deal with you guys, right? I talk about, you know, hit the like button on this video. If this video gets a certain amount of likes, I'll do a prop bet live stream this weekend. But I understand that last week we did that business deal. You absolutely smashed the like button on the UFC Fight Night Edwards versus Muhammad card, and I let you down. I did do the prop bet live stream, but it was posted much later than usual, and it just wasn't as good as usual. It was much shorter, and I couldn't go into as much detail on the prop bet as I'd usually like, because it was very close to the start time of that Edwards and Muhammad card, so I just didn't have time to go through everything before the event started. So I really let you guys down in a big way. I feel really guilty as well, because prop bets did perform really well on that card. It was actually our biggest winning night on props in maybe since we begun. We made around 17 units of profit, which is kind of crazy. We hit Matthew Semmelsberger to win by knockout or TKO. We hit Charles Jourdain to win in round 3. We hit Dan Ige to win by knockout, and also Ryan Spann to win by knockout as well. So an overall profit of about 17 units. So I'm a little bit annoyed at myself. I'm just a little bit annoyed because obviously I think that only like 300-400 people watched the live stream before the event took place, and usually the number's closer to like 800 to 1,000, so half as many people were able to get in on those bets as they usually, half as many people as usual got in on those bets. So I'm a little bit mad at myself, and I am really, really sorry. So there's no like target at all on this video, man. Hit the like button if you want. I would really appreciate it. But to try and make it up to you guys, I'm definitely going to be doing a prop bet on the next 2 events, whatever happens, just to kind of make it up to you guys. I'm a little bit annoyed that the one week where we didn't really do a very good prop bet video and it was posted late, we absolutely crushed. I'm a little bit mad at myself. To be honest, there was a good reason why the prop bet live stream was done late. Basically what happened was, last week on this Muhammad versus Edwards card, we finished researching that card on Friday night. So we started researching this week's card, Brunson versus Holland, last Friday. And we actually found a rock solid bet for that for this weekend's card, which I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. But when I find like a rock solid bet, I'll make like a really detailed 30 to 40 minute breakdown video for the website, which takes a lot of time. So yeah, basically what happened was, I had time to do the prop bet live stream. I'd like slotted it into my schedule, and my workflow and everything was sorted out for Saturday, to do a few bits and bobs on the website that I needed to do, get the live stream done just like I always do, and it was going to be a regular Saturday for me. But when I found that bet, the content for that bet had to be posted to my website last week, because I knew the odds would get destroyed over the weekend, and they did. The odds have got absolutely whacked over the weekend. So I needed to get that video out, and because of that, it kind of pushed everything back, and so the prop bet live stream got pushed to the end, which means we didn't start doing the stream until like 20 minutes before the Edward versus Muhammad fight card started, and it was just a nightmare. So I'm really, really sorry. I did try and plan my time out to get a good live stream in for you, but that bet kind of threw my schedule out of whack. But I'll make it up to you, man. These next 2 weeks, we'll get these prop bet live streams done, no problem. So hit the like button if you want. I would really appreciate it. If not, no troubles, man. We're gonna be getting these prop bets live streams done anyway. So yeah, let's dig in, man. This is gonna be a nice little video. We're going to be going deep on these fights, little bit of betting action on these fights as well, and one absolutely rock solid bet coming up. So let's get into it. We're not going to be talking about that fight. Hey, we're not going to be. That was didn't do that on purpose. Don't have time to talk about Leonardo Santos, Grant Dawson in this video. But if you would like to watch a breakdown video for Dawson Santos, head on over to my website and MMABettingTips.com, link in the description below, and you'll find a link for that video on there. So we now get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video. Let's piss off the YouTube copyright algorithm. So now we're going to be talking about Montserrat Ruiz and Cheyenne Bays. I believe that's the correct way to pronounce her name. If it's not, I do apologize to the Warrior Princess. Don't like to pronounce fighters' names wrong, but I'm sure you guys will correct me in the comments if it's pronounced differently. Anyway, both Cheyenne Bays and Montserrat Ruiz making their UFC debuts. Obviously, Cheyenne Bays has fought on the Contender Series, so she's had a soft debut into the UFC since the Contender Series takes place in the Apex Center, where the UFC event this weekend is going to be taking place. So Bays is kind of like making a soft debut, whereas Montserrat Ruiz, coming straight in from Invicta, has had no connection to the UFC before. This will be a true debut for her. But 2 debutants coming up. So one of the biggest factors that I think to take into consideration on this matchup is going to be an X factor. Now, we talk so much about how fighters match up from a technical point of view on this channel, but this is actually one of those fights where I do think a major X factor in this bout could determine the outcome of the fight. So obviously one of the major X factors on this matchup is that Montserrat Ruiz is stepping up to take the fight on about 10 days notice, which is not going to be an easy thing to do. However, she is Mexican, and we know Mexicans are tough, scrappy, and tend to have a pretty, legendary Latin American gas tank. You never really see a Mexican fighter with a bad gas tank. So I'm sure Montserrat Ruiz is going to be able to show up and look just fine on 10 days notice, especially because she's very, very small. So obviously smaller fighters tend to have, better gas tanks, not like fighters in heavier weight classes like light heavyweights, heavyweights, that kind of thing. She's only 5 foot tall with a 61-inch reach, which does make her exceptionally small for an MMA fighter. I do believe, don't quote me on this, but I think now that Jodie Esquibel has been released from the UFC, I actually think that Montserrat Ruiz is going to be the smallest fighter in the UFC. At 5 foot tall, I can't think of anyone else that's smaller in the UFC. So she's 5 foot tall with a 61-inch reach. On paper, Cheyenne Buys is 5'3" with a 63-inch reach. So she's not that much bigger. However, Montserrat Ruiz is very, very small. You can see that in her fights is very noticeable. She's extremely small compared to all of her opponents. And this is one really big notable X factor that we need to talk about, because size matters in MMA, especially women's MMA. So many women's MMA fights are decided by who is the most athletic, who is the most physically imposing fighter in that matchup. And with Cheyenne Buys being bigger than Montserrat Ruiz, with Ruiz being so small, there's no doubt that Buys is definitely the bigger, definitely the more physically imposing fighter here. So if we take a look at the odds on this matchup, Cheyenne Buys, obviously one of the biggest favourites on the card. She's currently floating around about, where are you, Cheyenne? Currently floating around about an average of 1.29, which is minus 345 for an implied probability of 78%, which is very interesting. If we take a look at the odds on Montserrat Ruiz, she is currently around about an average of 3.75, which is plus 275 for an implied probability of 27%. 27? Yeah. Okay, where do we begin with this one? Where do we begin? I think we begin with a little bit of fight footage on Montserrat Ruiz, because I want to play a little bit of footage of both these girls in the background while I talk about how they match up from a technical point of view. So Ruiz is the girl dressed all in black, and early on in this matchup, I think you're going to see what I mean about her size. She's just very, very small. Maybe if we actually go back to a face-off or something. Yeah, you can kind of see it there, right? How much smaller than her opponent she is. If we take a look at this opponent as well, this was against Sarah Saenz. So how tall is Sarah Saenz? We don't know. We don't know. But anyway, Montserrat Ruiz looks very, very small against every single person that I've seen her fight against. They're 5 foot tall, just very, very undersized for an MMA fighter. She should be fighting in the atomweight division, not the strawweight division. But we're going to play a little bit of footage here while we talk about this fight for a betting point of view. So, where do I begin? So Cheyenne Buys is one of the biggest favourites on this card. And from a technical point of view, I see no reason why she should be such a big favourite. In terms of the skills that both these girls bring to the table, Cheyenne doesn't really have many advantages, to be perfectly honest with you. When I see a fighter in the odds range that Cheyenne Buys is in, that 1.29 odds range, what those odds say to me is that a fighter has to have basically no way to lose. That's what those odds say to me. 1.29, implied probability of in that 80% range. If you understand probabilities, you know that what 80% is saying to you is that this thing is very, very likely to happen. And when I look at Cheyenne Buys, I look at all the skills that she brings to the octagon, there's nothing that I can point out where I could say she does that better than Ruiz, she does that better than Ruiz, and that's why she deserves to be a big favourite here. Obviously, Cheyenne Buys is a very attractive, charismatic, marketable fighter, and I do feel that the Cheyenne Buys as a package is having an influence on the odds here, as opposed to the skills that she brings to the octagon. There's nothing I've seen Cheyenne do which I think gives her an advantage here. The odds should definitely be closer than they are. So Ruiz is predominantly a striker. She trains under Eddie Bravo at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. If we take a look at her Instagram profile, we can see that she's getting in some training at some really good camps. She trains at King's MMA under Rafael Cordero, which is obviously one of the best gyms to train at. Brilliant gym. King's MMA have a long history of producing high-level fighters, and obviously Rafael Cordero, one of the best in the game. You always see her with the King's MMA merch. Here she is with Antonina and Valentina Shevchenko at King's MMA. And what's also quite impressive about Ruiz, if I keep scrolling, you will see that there's going to be a picture of her. So you've got the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu branding in the background, and if we keep scrolling through somewhere in her Instagram, I forget where I saw it, I don't think it was this far down. There she is with Gastelum, Verdum and Master Rafael Cordero himself. Alright, maybe if we go back up to the top, you can see, if I just keep a close eye on all these pictures, it's not that one, right? Yeah, there she is. So there you can see she is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Eddie Bravo, which is obviously a very, very, very high level of Jiu-Jitsu. So, quite often when I'm making these YouTube videos, and I will say things like, Thiago Santos is a low-level grappler, or Jan Blachowicz is a low-level grappler, I'll quite often have people slide into the comments trying to correct me and say, how can you say Thiago Santos is a low-level MMA grappler? I've checked his Wikipedia page. Thiago Santos has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And what I always say to them is not all black belts are created equal. A purple belt under Eddie Bravo is a very, very, very high level of grade. And a purple belt in Eddie Bravo, for me, counts for a lot more than a lot of black belts. So Montserrat Ruiz is likely pretty nasty on the ground, having a purple belt under Eddie Bravo. And so if this fight goes to the ground, Baze could find herself in a little bit of trouble here. It's inconclusive, but she could find herself in a little bit of trouble. The problem Ruiz has got is that because she's so small, she doesn't have any physicality to her grappling. So because she's so small, she's just not particularly effective at getting fights to the ground. Has no real offensive wrestling. You'll see in a moment in this fight, when she's working the takedowns in the clinch, she just isn't very strong because of how small she is. You see her fishing for the body lock here. But when you look at footage from, Ruiz's past fights, her opponents are able to shut down her offensive wrestling quite easily and move her around quite easily. You can see here she's working hard for a takedown, but her opponent's not in any danger, and she doesn't even really have any underhooks here. She's kind of just holding on to Ruiz's head. Her opponent is not using any of the correct techniques to stuff a takedown attempt here, and yet despite this, Ruiz is nowhere near a takedown. Ruiz has got this body lock. There's no underhooks in play for her opponent, but her opponent just doesn't look in any danger because Ruiz is so small. She doesn't have the physicality to upset her balance. I mean, look at this. You can see how hard Ruiz is committing to the takedown, and her opponent is very, very comfortable, even without any underhooks in play, even with Ruiz having full control of her body off this body lock. Ruiz is just really struggling quite bad here, and this is where it goes back to. This is where I go back to what I said at the beginning of the breakdown. Physicality so often determines the outcome of women's MMA fights, and you can see that Ruiz really, really lacks physicality. She's just too small for the strawweight division. She should be fighting at atomweight. What I can say about Ruiz's grappling is that most of her takedowns come from what you've just seen. They come from trips and throws, which, to some extent her size helps her with, because that lower center of gravity makes it easier to, get in deep on the hips of her opponent with those trips and throws. But she definitely lacks the physicality. And, if we just quickly flip over to Cheyenne Baze, even though Baze is only 5'3", she is a big, strong, athletic, physically imposing girl. And so, because Ruiz is so much smaller maybe not in terms of height, only three inches, but in terms of physicality, there's a big gap in physicality. I really think she could have a really tough time taking Bays down and holding her down, because another problem when you're very, very small and you take down a bigger opponent is that they can quite often just stand up if you put them in a bad position on the ground. But there's nothing special about Bays. When I see Bays at these odds, I would really be expecting her to do something that's a little bit special. There's nothing special here about Bays. Her striking's okay, her grappling's okay. There's just nothing special. And from a technical point of view, I'd probably say Ruiz is more skilled on the ground, but maybe Bays' physicality will negate that. What I would say about Cheyenne Bays is that she doesn't train at a very good gym. There are certain gyms in MMA that are phenomenal. If you think about the likes of, Sanford MMA, American Top Team, Tiger MMA and Muay Thai. When you see fighters train at these gyms, it almost gives them, extra skill points, because we know when fighters train at those gyms, they're going to be working with really high-level training partners, and they're going to be getting in, they're going to be making, improvements from fight to fight with a level of coaches and training partners that they've got to work with. When I look at Cheyenne Bays, she trains at Fortis MMA. Here you can see her with Emily Ducote, who's a very, very high-level wrestler. But I do think Fortis MMA is in that bracket of gyms which just isn't in a very good gym. It's just not a very good gym. I'd lump it into kind of like that Extreme Couture type gym where when you see fighters go to Fortis MMA, they just don't tend to improve very much and quite often go backwards. And a lot of the fighters at Fortis MMA have really, really bad fight IQ. If it were just one or two fighters that train the Fortis MMA with bad fight IQ, you could say, maybe it's down to the fighter. But because so many fighters that come out of Fortis MMA have bad fight IQ, it's too much of a trend for me. And you can see here, back in November 2020, she's wearing a blue belt under this gentleman. I don't know who this is, Uncle Tony BJJ, but I can assure you that a blue belt under this gentleman is nowhere near the level of ground game that a purple belt under Eddie Bravo will have. So if this fight goes to the ground, even though Cheyenne is big and strong and physically imposing, she may run into a little bit of trouble against Ruiz. She may run into a little bit of trouble. In terms of striking, Bays has just got a very, very average style. She just chips away at her opponent, not particularly dangerous, not particularly great amount of power in her hands. She's alright. Bays is alright. There's no weaknesses with Bays. But I'm judging Bays. You see a really, really weak takedown entry there, shot from miles away. Most fighters would have seen this takedown entry coming from a mile away. Look, her opponent there, Lindsay Garber, has stuffed the takedown there, and Cheyenne Bays, she's been she's been shut down. She's had to go to her knees, but instead of her opponent kind of clearing her legs, disengaging from this position and getting out of trouble, she hesitates, which enables Cheyenne Bays to hit that inside trip. But everything about Cheyenne is a little bit average, and when I see a fighter at these odds, they need to be a little bit special, is what I'm trying to say. Nothing against Cheyenne Bays. She's only 25 years old. She's going to be making a big improvement from fight to fight. And I understand I may be talking a little bit harshly about her, but I'm not talking about Cheyenne Bays in a harsh way to be critical of her as a fighter. I'm trying to give you guys my thoughts on her as this big of a favourite. And she just doesn't have the skill set to warrant this price tag. But I'm sure she's got a very bright future. In terms of striking, like I say, Bays just quite average. She's alright. Montserrat Ruiz, one of these fighters that just blitzes forward in straight lines, throwing straight punches. She does cover distance quite quickly. Cheyenne Bays doesn't read her opponent particularly well because she's quite an average striker. So, I do think Ruiz can catch Cheyenne Bays cold when she blitzes forward with those straight punch combinations. But yeah, this is one of those fights where it's kind of like, you know what? Bays shouldn't be this big of a favourite. The odds should definitely be closer the odds should definitely be closer based on how they match up from a skill perspective. All I would say is, obviously I'm not going to be betting on Cheyenne Bays at these odds. The risk to reward ratio is too bad. She's too big of a favourite. But at the same time, I don't really want to bet on Ruiz either, because she's very small and undersized for the division. And we know physicality so often plays a part in the outcome of women's MMA matches. She's taking the fight on 10 days notice. And, I was saying earlier on in the video that I didn't see any major advantages in this fight for Bays. And I'm really putting a lot of emphasis on Bays because the burden of proof is on Bays, right? She's the big favourite. She has to justify that price tag to us. I don't see any reason why Bays should be that big of a favourite. But at the same time, when I look at Ruiz, I don't see anything Ruiz does particularly well that I think will cause Bays a problem either. So I do think the odds should be closer. But I'm going to pass on this one. Keep it tight. I'm not interested in betting this fight. Hopefully, that made sense to you. We now get into the next fight that I want to talk about in this video, which is going to be Max Payne Griffin against Kenan Song. And this is a very, very good stylistic matchup for Max Payne. Fuck it. Let's just call him Max Payne, yo. Let's go, Rockstar, baby. Okay, so if we look at the odds on this fight, we can currently see that Max Griffin is around about a 1.50 favourite, which is minus 200 for an implied probability of 67%. If you take a look at Kenan Song, whatever you want to call him, currently around about an average of 2.60, which is plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. So, if we take a look at UFC stats, the stats on this fight are going to be quite useful for summarising why I think this is a very good stylistic matchup for Mr. Griffin. So, when we think of Kenan Song and Max Griffin, obviously both these guys are primarily strikers. Very, very different styles of striking though. Max Griffin likes to stay very, very light on his feet, bounce around on the outside, and use his long jab to chip away at his opponent. Whereas Kenan Song, much more of a power striker that likes to get inside, load up on big power punches, and look to use his power to assassinate his opponents to take him out. This guy does have a lot of power in his hands. Having said that, even though we have seen Max Griffin dinged, wobbled and rocked a few times in his UFC career, this guy is tough as nails. And because he has a phenomenal gas tank, because his conditioning is so good, Max Griffin is one of these guys that can recover very, very quickly if he does get hurt. So if we look at his record, we can see dating back to when he first came into the UFC on short notice against Colby Covington back in 2016. He's just been an absolute decisionator. No one's been able to finish him, which is really impressive considering he's fought some dangerous opponents like Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, Mike Perry, Alex Oliveira's no picnic. The fact that he's been able to go the distance with these heavy hitters shows how tough Max Griffin is, how difficult it is to put him away. So while Kenan Song does have a decent amount of power in his hands, this is not going to be easy to put Kenan Song. This is not going to be easy to put Max Griffin away. So when we look at this matchup, really what we're looking at is, what's the probability the Song is going to be able to finish Griffin? And you can see by his record, the way that he moves, it's not too likely. Like, Kenan Song does have a lot of power in his hands, but, Morono, Krantz have gone the distance with him. It's unlikely Song will be able to knock Max Griffin out. So, like I said, when we think about these two guys as strikers, very different styles. Griffin's got that volume striking style. Song has got that head-hunting power striking style. But what's interesting about this matchup is that I actually think grappling is where it could be decided. Because when you look at these guys standing up, it's kind of difficult to get a read on what's going to come out on top. Is Song going to be able to negate Griffin's volume style with power? Because, we know Griffin really struggles to put his stamp on rounds. It's one of the reasons why he's lost so many decisions and been involved in a couple of split decisions as well. Griffin is one of these guys that just chips away at his opponents with volume range-finding strikes, but he doesn't really do anything, big, anything round-defining, which means Griffin's one of these guys that might be outstriking his opponent by a wide margin, but they could just land one big shot and wipe out that volume, with one big damaging power shot that gets a reaction from the guys in the arena and leaves a lasting impression on the judges' scorecards. So it's difficult to kind of gauge who will have the advantage standing, but what I would say is Keenan Song's gas tank is very, very bad. This guy tends to slow down significantly as the fight goes on. So even though it's difficult to gauge early on who's going to have the advantage standing, I think as the fight wears on, Griffin's really going to start to run away with it in the second half of the fight. But I actually think that this fight could be decided in grappling, because even though Max Griffin is primarily a striker, over his last sort of four or five fights, we've seen much more of a willingness to use grappling to try and beat fellow strikers. And the stats on the UFC website very much show this. So if we look at his last fight against Ramiz Brahimaj, he didn't go for a single takedown in that fight, but that's because Griffin, to be fair, is quite a low level on the ground, and Brahimaj is a decent grappler. So Griffin probably demonstrated some really good fight IQ there and thought, you know what, I'm not going to try and take this Brahimaj guy down because Brahimaj is probably going to have an advantage over me on the ground. Used a little bit of wrestling in the fight against Alex Oliveira with 2 takedowns. A lot of wrestling in the fight against Alex Morono with 4 takedowns. I like that. Morono isn't great off his back. So, Griffin was trying to steal rounds with those takedowns. Used a lot of wrestling against Zalim Imadeev as well. And used wrestling to try and steal rounds against Thiago Alves. So while Max Griffin is primarily a striker, he's not a particularly skilled grappler. His willingness to use his takedowns to try and steal rounds and put more of a stamp on rounds is something that I think could really benefit him in this fight. And you can look at the gear shift, right? In his first 5 fights in the UFC, he attempted barely any takedowns, and then in his last 4, he's come in, or last 5, sorry, he's come in with quite a lot of grappling heavy game plans. That is notable to me because Song Kinan's takedown defense is very, very bad. You can see that he's only defended 45% of takedowns in his 5 fights in the UFC, which is very, very bad because he hasn't really fought any strong wrestlers. Griffin has got a great gas tank, decent offensive wrestling, decent double leg takedown entries, and a nice 76-inch reach, which means he's got nice long arms that he can use to connect his hands around his opponent's body and take them down. So Song's takedown offense is shockingly bad. He's very, very weak off his back as well. And so I think that the grappling is a massive part of victory for Griffin. That's the reason why I will be betting Griffin small this weekend. Nothing major, but I will be taking Griffin small. With Griffin, the biggest risk factor to losing a bet on Griffin this weekend is ultimately you're betting on a striker to hopefully use his grappling to win a fight. And that's always a little bit risky because fighters are stubborn. Fighters don't always make the best decisions in fights. They don't always take the easiest path to victory. And so if Griffin does come out on Saturday night and tries to win a kickboxing match against Song and doesn't use his grappling, I think this matchup will be really close. But if Griffin does come into the fight with a grappling heavy game plan, I think this matchup is going to be an absolute cakewalk for Griffin, and I think he'll dominate. It's hard for me to put into words how bad Song is on the ground. He's very fucking bad. There's no way I would be betting this guy this weekend. Now let's talk about the fight between Adrian Yanez and Gustavo Lopez. So when I saw that these two guys were on the main card, with Adrian Yanez making his UFC... No, he isn't. Sorry, that's disrespectful. Adrian Yanez only with his second fight in the UFC. I was a little bit confused because obviously Lopez and Yanez have only got one fight in the UFC. And I was kind of like, why would they put this fight on the main card over matchups like Trevin Giles and Roman Dolidze or Grant Dawson and Leonardo Santos? It was a bit of a weird one. I couldn't kind of work out why these boys were on the main card. But when I started researching these two fighters, holy shit, I know exactly why the UFC have put this fight on the main card. It's a phenomenal matchup. It's a fantastic matchup. And this one's got Fight of the Night written all over it. This one is like guaranteed to be entertaining. You're either guaranteed to get a brutal KO in this fight or a really, really entertaining scrap. Both have got very different styles, but both have got very, very exciting styles. There's fireworks guaranteed in this matchup. So if we look at the X factors, there aren't many really. Adrian Yanez, 27 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach. Gustavo Lopez, 31 years old, 5'5" with a 67-inch reach. So Lopez is very small for the bantamweight division. He's, realistically with his wingspan, he should probably be fighting at flyweight. However, this guy's quite strong. He packs a punch, and he held his own in his UFC debut against Merab Dvalishvili on less than a week's notice, which, speaks volumes for how tough Lopez is because of how difficult an opponent Dvalishvili is for pretty much everyone in the bantamweight division. So both these guys are primarily strikers, but they've got very, 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 very different styles of striking. How much footage did I bring up? Okay. Do you know what? I was contemplating showing you some footage of Adrian Yanez from back in 2019. This fight and this fight are available on YouTube. I decided against it though, because even though these fights are relatively recent, this guy, man, Adrian Yanez, is making ridiculous improvements in a short space of time. If you go back and watch his fights from 2019 compared to his fights from 2020, it's like looking at a different fighter, which is kind of nuts because earlier on in the video, I showed you a little bit of footage from back in 2017 with Montserrat Ruiz. But to be honest with you, Ruiz's style hasn't changed that much. She doesn't look that different now in 2020 to how she did look back in 2017. But Yanez looks completely different in 2020 to how he does in 2019. If you go back and watch his fights in 2019, he's much slower, much more flat-footed, doesn't read his opponent as well as he does now. I don't know what he's done recently, but this guy moves phenomenally well. Great footwork, great head movement, very fast, brilliant boxing. This guy looks legit as fuck in his last couple of fights. They didn't last very long. We've only got 3 minutes of footage available to make a decision on Yanez from the last year or so. But what I can tell you is just by the way he moved compared to how he moved back in 2019, you can see this guy's making big improvements. So I would compare Adrian Yanez's style of striking to maybe like a Jorge Masvidal. He looks a little bit like Masvidal. He's got that swagger like Masvidal, a very, very heavy boxing style. And just like Masvidal, Yanez relies on his ability to read his opponent, see the punches coming, and use head movement to slip those punches and then fire back with big counters. That's Yanez's style. Very technical, very fluid, very high-level striker. His striking looks legit. And it needs to be, because obviously if we take a look at the odds on this fight, we can see that he is one of the biggest favourites on the card. Currently floating around about an average of 1.44, which is minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. This guy needs to be good because he's only had one fight in the UFC. And like we were saying with Cheyenne Bays earlier on, when you see a big favourite, we talk a lot about the big favourite because they need to justify that price tag to us. I don't see any skills from Cheyenne Bays which justifies that price tag. But Yanez is a little bit special. I'm not saying he deserves the big price tag, but he's good, man. He's very, very good. His striking's legit. The only weakness that I can see in Yanez so far is that he does rely on his chin a little bit too much. So he fights with his hands very low, and he invites his opponent to come forward and attack him so he can see the punches coming, slip the shot with head movement, and fire back with big counters. Unfortunately, what that means is when Yanez doesn't see the punches coming, he does tend to eat clean, hard, big power shots. His chin looks great. No one I've seen has been able to put him in any danger, but he's definitely there to be hit. This guy is super scrappy, which does make it dangerous to bet on him as a big favourite, because Gustavo Lopez, even though he's 5'5", this dude does pack a punch. If we take a look at some of his past fights, this guy hits like a fucking truck. He's not particularly great from a technical point of view. His striking is super scrappy. Very, very sloppy, actually. His striking kind of reminds me a little bit of Joseph Benavidez's, because you've got, Lopez with his small, compact frame, and he kind of just blitzes forward in straight lines, winging big, wide hooks. But where this, with his chin up high and exposed, just like Benavidez, but where this guy differs is that his power is unbelievable. And I will show you a couple of knockouts here, which shows you that it is very, very dangerous to bet on Yanez as a big favourite here, because there's no doubt that Lopez has the power to knock anyone in the division out if he connects. This guy has devastating power. And when you see a guy land one big knockout, it's possible it's a flash KO, right? It's possible he just caught his opponent out of nowhere. But Lopez has multiple savage knockouts on his record, which is more of a trend to me. And to me, it shows this guy has abnormal power for his size and abnormal power for his division. And we're going to see a knockout coming up in just a moment, which is terrifying. So I didn't want to show you footage from Yanez from back in 2019 because I believe he's improved so much since then, and I didn't want it to kind of cloud your judgment. If you were to see Gustavo Lopez looking pretty sharp here, see Yanez looking a little bit flat back in 2019, and then think, do you know what, I'm going to bet Yanez because I think Lopez could cause him trouble. Trust me, the version of Yanez we've seen in 2020 is legit, but what a fucking knockout, man. This Gustavo Lopez guy is for reals. Brutal, savage, devastating knockout power. And if we look at a replay of this guy's just got crazy power, man. Just look at this. Absolutely bodies this dude. Major power. Just a short hook on the chin. Absolute savage. And so, remember what we were saying about Yanez's only real weakness being the fact that he relies on his chin a little bit too much and he leaves his chin up high and exposed in exchanges. That can obviously get you in a lot of trouble against a guy that clearly hits very, very, very hard. That was an absolute savage knockout. I'm hoping... that was savage. That was savage. But wait, there's more. I can show you another one. I'm going to spoil you guys. Remember what I was saying? Whenever you just get one big knockout, you know, it could be like just like a flash KO that doesn't mean much. But when you get, you know, two big knockouts like this, a trend is starting to form, and it's clear our boy Gustavo Lopez has major power in his hands. Okay, so the knockout will be coming up any second, but one thing these videos perhaps doesn't show us is Gustavo Lopez also has pretty bad striking defense. You will see him kind of darting forward in straight lines a lot, like Joseph Benavidez, with his chin up high and exposed. And when he gets inside, his head doesn't move and he's just looking to wing big hooks. That obviously puts him at risk of being knocked out as well because, you know, Yanez is an absolute sniper. Yanez has got power in his hands as well. Yanez, very technical, big power in his hands, very fast. But, you know, both these boys like to rely on their chin a lot, I will say that. So the probability of there being a bad knockout in this fight is very, very high. And speaking of knockouts, I think this knockout is coming up any second now. And you can see that the other knockout we've seen from Lopez, not just a flash KO, not just luck. This guy, major, major, major power in his hands. See how he kind of just blitzes forward in straight lines though, kind of chasing after his opponent with his chin up high and exposed. But you can see again, major, major power from this guy. If we take a look at the replay, are we going to get a replay? Again, just another really short little hook from a different angle. Just these little short hooks that he throws right on the button. Very, very accurate. Hits very hard. And obviously, he's fighting a guy that does like to keep his hands low. So there is a lot of risk here for Yanez. So yeah, when we look at this fight, you know, Yanez is a big favourite. From a technical point of view, he's a lot better than Gustavo Lopez as a striker. He's much faster, much more technical. He moves better than Lopez, but that power is a great equalizer. So there's no way I can bet Yanez here as a big favourite because very, very possible that Lopez catches him with something big. But I don't want to bet on Lopez either, just because I do see this fight standing and I see Yanez as the better overall striker. This one is going to be a pass for me, but fireworks written all over it, man. Fight of the night at the very least, or no, a big knockout in that fight, I would say at the very least. And if it ends up going the distance, probably gonna have fight of the night written all over it. I didn't talk a lot about how those guys match up from a grappling point of view, because they are both primarily strikers, and there's not really any recent footage available on Yanez's grappling, so his grappling's pretty much an unknown. We now go into the next fight that I want to talk about in this video, which is going to be Tuivasa against Harry Hunsucker. So Hunsucker, with an unfortunate surname, stepping up yesterday, which means he's going to be taking this fight on 4 days notice, which is not going to be an easy thing for him to do, because in his past fights I have seen that he tends to slow down bad after about 2 or 3 minutes. He doesn't look like he's in the best shape, and so because of that, you know, if Tuivasa can just make it through the first 2-3 minutes, which he probably will be able to do because Tuivasa's chin is amazing, this then becomes a very, very difficult fight for Hunsucker. But if we take a look at the odds, Tuivasa currently around about a 1.29 favourite, minus 345 for an implied probability of 78%. The exact same odds as Cheyenne Bays. And if we take a look at the odds on Mr. Hunsucker, currently around about an average of 3.60 with a very wide spread, which is plus 260 for an implied probability of 28%. So both these guys are primarily strikers. They both have a predominantly boxing-based style of fighting. And we'll take a little bit of a look at Hunsucker here, wearing the black shorts, as we talk about this matchup. So, obviously, you know, when I see someone in the odds range that Tuivasa is in, like we were talking about with Cheyenne Bays, in that odds range, the fighter has to have pretty much no. And to be honest with you, I would say that's the case with this fight. You know, I wouldn't usually bet a guy like Tuivasa in this odds range because Tuivasa's takedown offense is very poor. His ground game is very poor. I'm sure he's working on it, you know, with the time that he's put in at American Kickboxing Academy. But we still know from his fight against Sergey Spivak that on the ground at least, Tuivasa very, very low level on the ground. And until he proves us differently, it's going to be one of those situations where we can't trust him on the ground. Now, even though I have seen Hunsucker shoot some takedowns and he's able to inflict a reasonable amount of damage on the ground, what I would say is that because his gas tank looks so bad, even if he were to take Tuivasa down, unless he could finish Tuivasa within the first 3 or 4 minutes, I don't believe he'd have the energy to go on and finish Tuivasa into the second and third, or have the energy to take Tuivasa down into the second and third. So we see him hit a single leg takedown there, and even though I'm sure he can hit that single leg on Tuivasa, because this guy's gas tank is just so bad, you know, like I say, even if he takes Tuivasa down early, he's probably just going to gas himself out, and then Tuivasa's going to be able to take over in the second half of the fight. But from what I've seen, both these guys are primarily boxers. Tuivasa's obviously got, you know, decent boxing, good movement, an amazing Maori chin, very difficult to put away, and Tuivasa's obviously got a great gas tank, which is unusual for a fighter with that size and that body type. But Mark Hunt was the same, right? As long as the fight is standing, Mark Hunt had the gas tank to go 3 hard rounds, no problem. Tuivasa is exactly the same. Tuivasa's got a great gas tank, good boxing, hits hard, and while Hunsucker probably will have an advantage on the ground, you know, this is one of those fights where I don't think his gas tank is going to enable him to use it. So don't want to spend long on this one. Tuivasa's a big favourite. He deserves to be a big favourite. I don't really want to bet on him at these odds because, you know, every single heavyweight carries big power in their hands. Maybe Hunsucker lands something crazy, although that's very unlikely because Tuivasa's chin is amazing. You know, maybe Hunsucker takes Tuivasa down and causes him big problems on the ground, but I don't want to bet on that either because obviously, you know, this guy looks like he's got a pretty bad gas tank, and I think Tuivasa's probably skilled enough on the ground to weather the storm and get the fight in the second and the third round where he could take over. So no bet on this fight for me. Don't want to talk about it for very long. But you know, Tuivasa's the rightful favourite, put it that way. So, at the beginning of the video, I talked about how I wasn't able to get a prop bet out last week, or a prop bet live stream out in good time last week. And I gotta actually let you guys know, I don't know if you realise this, but prop bets get posted to the website throughout the week. So like from a Monday during fight week, I will start posting prop bets to the website. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you want my props, you don't have to wait until the live streams to get them. If you want them earlier in the week, all you've got to do is go to MMABettingTips.com, go to the lab, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you can see prop bets here. If you click that, every week I'll have prop bets throughout the week. So if you're one of these guys that needs a drive to like a casino or a betting shop to get your bets in, or you don't want to wait until very close to the time of the event to see the props, just head on over to my website, man, MMABettingTips.com. You can get the props on there. But earlier on in the live stream, earlier on in the video, I was saying that the prop bet live stream this week was late because we started researching UFC Fight Night Brunson versus Holland last week, and on Friday we found an excellent bet on this card, which meant that I had to spend a lot of time making a really detailed 30-minute breakdown video for my members on my site around the fighter that I recommend betting in this matchup. And of course, the fighter that I'm recommending to bet is Gregor Gillespie. Now, unfortunately, his odds have got absolutely annihilated since we locked that bet in. We locked in a bet on Gregor Gillespie last week when he was up at about 1.53, and since then you can see his odds have got absolutely steamed. I'm very, very sorry, but I do think my community may have moved the odds on this one, because if you look at when the odds started to decline, they started to decline from 1.53 on Friday and then just fell off a cliff. I put the bet out on this fight from like Friday night / Saturday morning, and so I think as soon as I posted this bet to the site, all my members jumped on it and we completely annihilated these odds. So I am really, 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 really sorry, but you know what? Even at 1.40, I think Gregor Gillespie is still a good bet here. So even though his odds have declined by about 20-25%, I would definitely still bet Gregor Gillespie here. So if you take a look at his odds, 1.50 minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. Compare that to Brad Riddell, currently floating around about an average of 3.0, which is plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. Man, this is just such a good fight for Gregor Gillespie, and I feel really, really bad for Brad Riddell, actually. I just feel like this guy puts on exciting fights. He's improving at a rapid rate. You know, he's a great fighter to watch. And I just feel like the UFC have thrown him to the wolves here by giving him the worst stylistic matchup imaginable. This is about as bad a stylistic matchup as it gets for Brad Riddell. And I feel really bad for him. I don't think there was any need for the UFC to put this fight together. Like, literally, if you would look at every single name in the lightweight division and you would say, who is the worst stylistic matchup for Brad Riddell, Gillespie would be in the top 3. Up there with Makhachev, up there with Khabib Nurmagomedov. The guy is a fucking nightmare. This guy is a nightmare. And I know I'll probably take a lot of shit from people in the comments watching this video who don't understand what I'm trying to say or don't understand MMA. But it's very, very possible that Gregor Gillespie is the best grappler in the UFC's lightweight division. It's possible that this guy is the best grappler in the UFC. Now, I know that there will be people rushing to the comments to say, hang on, how can you say this? Khabib Nurmagomedov's 30-0. Islam Makhachev ragdolls everyone. You know, Gregor Gillespie hasn't fought anyone. How can you say Gregor is potentially a better grappler than guys like Makhachev and Nurmagomedov? And what I would say to you is, Gillespie can only beat the guys that are put in front of him, right? I understand Makhachev, I understand Khabib have fought way tougher guys, but when you look at the technique that Gregor Gillespie brings to the table, he's unlike anything else that I've ever seen in MMA. This guy's offensive wrestling is unbelievable, and we know that this guy has a very, very strong pedigree, right? He's an NCAA Division 1 level champion. This guy's offensive wrestling is unbelievable. What you notice about NCAA Division 1 level wrestlers is sometimes you get like a Darian Caldwell or, you know, a Tyrell Fortune, and they come into MMA and they don't, for whatever reason, they're not able to take that NCAA Division 1 level pedigree and turn it into a style of wrestling that works well in MMA. Sometimes they really struggle. And then you get other guys like a Colby Covington or a Frankie Edgar, and they are able to just use that NCAA base collegiate level wrestling and just develop a style of MMA grappling that is an absolute nightmare for, guys to deal with. And I would say Gregor's style of MMA grappling is like top 5 the best I've ever seen, ever. And you can throw Kamaru Usman in there, you could throw Khabib in there, you could throw Chimaev in there, you could throw George St. Pierre in there, you could throw Daniel Cormier in there, you could throw any wrestler you want into the mix. Gregor is top 5 best MMA grapplers I've ever seen. The guy is unbelievable. And if you want to appreciate how good this guy is, again, I hate to plug it. I'm not plugging it. I'm just trying to help you understand what the reality of this guy's ability is. Go to my website, MMABettingTips.com. Check out the breakdown video for this bet, right, and go into a hell of a lot more detail on why Gillespie is going to cause Brad Riddell ultra big problems here. Gregor Gillespie's MMA grappling is as good as it gets. It's as simple as that. In order to stop this guy's grappling, you have to have the elite of the elite of the elite takedown defense with no exceptions. I'm talking takedown defense on a Jose Aldo level. And I'm not talking Jose Aldo level for 1 or 2 rounds, hoping that the wrestler slows down and then you can take over with your striking. I'm talking Jose Aldo level takedown defense for 100 rounds. Because one of the things that makes Gregor Gillespie so devastating is that this guy has just got a gas tank like I've never seen. Usually when you see someone with the style of MMA grappling that Gillespie has got, it's not sustainable. And they start to slow down after a little while. I mean, we've even seen it happen with Khabib, right, in the Al Iaquinta fight, where as the fight wears on, Khabib becomes a little bit flatter. But because of the pace that he puts on his opponents, they slow down with him, and therefore, his edge in physicality, grappling, cardio is still enough to see him through and overwhelm his opponents. Gregor Gillespie is different because this guy can sprint non-stop, action-packed, big drama fucking show, itchy nose. This guy Gillespie doesn't stop. He can sprint from the first second of a fight till the last. He is unbelievable. He's unbelievable. And usually the way you deal with this type of grappler is you try and make them work really hard for takedowns early on until they start to slow down. Their offensive wrestling becomes less effective. And then, like I say, you can start to take over with your striking. This guy doesn't slow down. There's no slowing. He's fucking relentless. He's a nightmare. And I think he might be the best MMA grappler of all time. I said it. He's 13-1. There will be plenty of jabronis in the comments telling me that Gregor hasn't fought anyone. I understand that. I understand Khabib's 30-0. I understand Daniel Cormier's an Olympian. I understand all these things. But in terms of MMA grappling, it doesn't get better than Gregor Gillespie. And the reason why he's so good is because not only can he put that crazy, relentless pace on you, but he can do it while overwhelming you with information. If you look at guys like Daniel Cormier, or guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov, or guys like Khamzat Chimaev, very, very high-level grapplers, but these guys break you down by staying one step ahead of you. So they'll get in on a deep takedown, they'll put you on the ground, and then because they're at such a high level of grappling, they'll be aware of how you're going to try and defend that position. But they've already thought how you may defend that position, and so what they do is they already have something that they can do to shut you down. So say, for example, when you hit the ground, if Khabib takes you down close to the cage, Khabib knows that as soon as you hit the ground, you're going to try and post on the canvas, get your back tight to the cage and start the wall walk. Because Khabib's already aware of that, he's already making it difficult for you to get your back against the cage and post off the canvas before you've even hit the ground. That's what makes guys like Khabib difficult to deal with. Gregor Gillespie is a whole new problem because this guy's style of wrestling is to just overwhelm you with information until he gets you where he wants you to be. So, for example, he may shoot in on a single leg, As soon as you stuff the single leg, he'll immediately transition to a double leg. As soon as you've dealt with a double leg, he'll immediately go to the body lock. As soon as you've dealt with a body lock, he'll immediately go to the single. And he'll just keep going and going and going until you get overwhelmed and you just can't beat him to the punch. What I mean is, say for example he shoots a single leg and you're able to get an underhook in play or clear your leg and get out of there. He'll immediately drive through on the double leg. But say you still got a double leg in say you still got an underhook in play and you manage to dig another one, he'll let go of it and he'll just immediately duck under and get to the body lock. Say you break the body lock grip, he'll drop under and get to the single leg. You just can't get rid of him. He's relentless, he never stops, and it's extremely difficult to deal with, because where we're talking about guys like Khabib, guys like DC, guys like Chimaev staying one step ahead of their opponent, to stop a guy like Gillespie, you've got to stay one step ahead of him. But you don't just have to deal with one thing that you need to stay ahead of him on. You need to stay ahead of him on like 3 or 4 different levels simultaneously. When I was researching this fight, I counted in his fight against Yancy Medeiros, he transitioned between 5 different takedown attempts in 12 seconds. I think it was 2 single legs, 2 body locks and a double leg. And the problem is, where he is working at that pace, when he's thinking that fast, if you're not at his level of grappling, you cannot comprehend what he's going to do next. So it's very, very difficult to beat him to the position he's trying to put you in. So for example, say he's got you in a body lock and then he's going to transition to a single leg. It's very, very difficult to beat him to that single leg position and start to defend it, because he could be looking at hitting suplexes, outside trips, inside trips, double legs. You've no idea what this guy's trying to do to you. So you've got to be aware of 6 or 7 things he could do to you at any one time. And it's just impossible. He's just an impossible problem to solve. He's a fucking nightmare. And I can't put into words how good of a grappler this guy is. This is such a difficult fight for Brad Riddell, because he's got very, very rudimentary takedown defense. If his opponent shoots in, he knows what to do. He knows to clear his legs, try and get underhooks in play, try and get his back against the cage to defend the takedown. Riddell is very, very good at stuffing singular takedown entries. But when you start to use chain wrestling on this guy, he falls apart. And Gregor Gillespie is the daddy of chain wrestling. One of the best chain wrestlers I've ever seen in MMA. It's as simple as that. This guy has future champion written all over him. The only downside is that he is a little bit old at 34 years old, but he's got an amazing gas tank. You know, he's very, very young in his MMA career. He's only, 14 fights into his MMA career. Very much reminds me of Frankie Edgar, but with much better offensive wrestling, not as good striking as Frankie Edgar. So this fight's a fucking nightmare for Brad Riddell. It's a fucking nightmare. The problem with Riddell is his takedown defense isn't great. When he gets taken down, he's very, very weak off his back. Doesn't really know how to defend himself. And even though, because Brad Riddell is a big, strong dude, he's reasonably good at working his way back up to his feet when he does get taken down, because he's not a confident grappler or a very skilled grappler, he does everything very methodically when he works his way back up to his feet, in terms of, say he gets taken down and then he works his way back up to his feet, he'll be very careful not to expose his back. He'll be very, very aware of all the submission threats that his opponent can hit him with, and so he'll methodically work through positions where he doesn't put himself in danger of being caught in a nasty submission. The problem is, because he's very slow and methodical in the way he works out of grappling positions, a guy like Gregor Gillespie is just going to drown him. It's as simple as that. There's levels. There's levels, and if you hesitate on the ground, a guy like Gregor is just going to punish you. So, where we're talking about fighters like Tai Tuivasa, Cheyenne Bays being big favourites who are flawed. Montel Jackson, fighters, big favourites who are flawed. Gregor should be the big favourite here. Gregor should be the biggest favourite on the card. Gregor should be a bigger favourite than Montel Jackson. This fight, from a stylistic point of view, is an absolute cakewalk. and there's nothing Brad Riddell can do to stop Gregor Gillespie's wrestling. It's as simple as that. There's nothing he can do. Obviously, though, every bet carries risk. Full disclosure, Gregor Gillespie will be my biggest pre-fight bet of the year financially. I'll be going bigger on this guy than anyone else that I've gone on this year. This guy will be my biggest bet of the year. My most confident bet since I bet Kimeev to beat Gerald Meerschaert. Gillespie is my biggest bet. But doesn't mean there's a 100% chance he's going to win. Doesn't mean it's absolutely certain. Every bet carries risk factors, and there are certainly risk factors with this fight. There are ways Gregor Gillespie can win. When I say that Gregor Gillespie is my most confident bet of the year, I'm not telling you to go bet, go sell your house, your car, your camel, your sister, your wife, and bet it on Gregor Gillespie. All I'm saying is, in terms of value and in terms of stylistic matchups, our boy Gregor Gillespie is as good as it gets. But there are ways that he can lose, for sure. This is Gregor Gillespie's first fight back after suffering this absolutely devastating knockout at the hands of Kevin Lee. This is about as bad a knockout as you'll ever see. And this is a career-changing knockout. So many times we see fighters in their first fight back after a real bad knockout just lack confidence, lack that aggression, and just look a shadow of himself. It could take a very, very long time to get over a knockout like this psychologically. It could take a very long time to get your confidence back. And on top of that, when you've been knocked out like this, it can also affect your durability forever. The brain will never fully heal from a knockout like this. A knockout like this might take years off Gregor's life. And so the significance of this knockout cannot be understated. It does add an element of risk to this bet, to be betting on Gregor Gillespie in his first fight back from this knockout. It's risky. What I will say is that I do like how much time Gregor has taken off. Obviously, he's taken almost 18 months off since this knockout loss to Kevin Lee. And while on one hand, that's not good because of ring rust, on the other hand, it has given his brain a lot of time to heal and hopefully will have given him time to get over that really bad knockout loss, because I would imagine the rehabilitation from that knockout loss was pretty fucking brutal. It was a bad one. That's the most significant risk factor that I could find in this matchup. The other risk factor would be something that we said earlier on in the video with Max Griffin, where we were saying that fighters don't always make life easy for themselves. Sometimes fighters choose to fight with very, very bad game plans and strategies. And so you can never fully trust a fighter to go out and take the easiest path to victory. If Gregor Gillespie does decide to mess around and do a little bit of striking in this fight, obviously Brad Riddell has a massive advantage when it comes to striking. So if Gillespie does decide just to come into this fight and not wrestle and instead, get into a kickboxing fight, it does happen. Even though Gregor Gillespie is a very high-level grappler, former NCAA Division 1 level champion, we've seen it where, for whatever reason, these grapplers just decide to try and be strikers. And if Gillespie does try and win a kickboxing match here, obviously he's going to get himself into a lot of trouble against Riddell. One of Gillespie's biggest weaknesses is that his striking defense is pretty bad and he's very, very reckless. Although, like I say, in a grappling match, that's not going to matter because Riddell's not going to be able to hurt him on the ground. So we've spoken about, Gregor Gillespie's path to victory, how easy a stylistic fight this is if he comes in with a grappling heavy game plan. But we've also talked about how there is a legit risk factor with this being Gillespie's first fight back after a really, really bad knockout. Obviously, Riddell is a high-level kickboxer, but the reason why I feel comfortable going very big on Gillespie this weekend is just quite simply because I don't feel Riddell is that dangerous. He's a very, very technical kickboxer. You definitely don't want to be getting caught clean and hard by this guy. But I would say he's more of a high-level kickboxer who breaks you down with volume as opposed to landing that one big kill shot that's going to put you away. We can kind of see that with the fact that his last 4 fights have all gone to a decision. And what's quite notable to me is just back in 2019, which wasn't that long ago, it wasn't actually that long before we last saw Gregor Gillespie, Brad Riddell actually went the distance with a guy called Mikey Vautua, who had a losing record of 5-8 on a card, called Wollongong Wars. You know what I'm saying? So I know Riddell's a high-level kickboxer. I know he's dangerous standing. But if a guy, with a losing record of 5-8, can go the distance with Brad Riddell. There's a pretty good chance that a guy as tough and durable as Gregor Gillespie can go the distance with Brad Riddell as well. What I would also say about Riddell is that he does have a very, very good gas tank, but his striking does become a lot flatter as the fight goes on. So if we just look at a picture of Brad Riddell, we can see that he does have like a compact muscular frame, right? He's very, very small for a lightweight at 5'7". That won't matter here because Gregor's also small for a lightweight at 5'7". But if we look at Riddell's body type, not the best pictures to actually illustrate it, actually. We're not getting the best pictures. I guess because you kind of have to see him stood against someone like his opponent, right? Like a Jamie Malarkey who's long and lean. Yeah, we're not really getting the best pictures to illustrate the point I'm trying to make. But the point I'm trying to make is that Brad Riddell's kind of got like this small, compact, stocky frame with big muscular arms. And so, even though he's got a great gas tank, he does tend to become flatter as the fight goes on, which means his hand speed drops as the fight goes on. And when his arms fill up with blood from exerting energy, his arms become a lot slower and heavier as the fight goes on. And so, because of that, Riddell does become a lot less dangerous as the fight goes on. And so if Gregor Gillespie comes into this matchup with a grappling heavy game plan, forces Riddell to work hard to defend takedowns and work his way back up to his feet in round one, I think Riddell's arms will be too tired to generate knockout power in the second and third, making it significantly less likely that Riddell is going to be able to flash KO Gregor Gillespie. And like I say, it's very unlikely Riddell wins this fight by decision. The only way Riddell is going to win this fight by decision is if Gillespie tries to win a kickboxing match. I can absolutely promise you there is no fucking way that if Gillespie comes into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, Riddell can keep this fight standing. It's not happening. Gillespie will ragdoll this guy. Riddell's only hope of winning this fight is to land a flash KO, which, as you've seen, is quite unlikely, or Gillespie just comes in with the worst game plan ever, chooses not to use his wrestling, tries to beat this guy in a kickboxing match, which again, I think is a little bit unlikely. So I hope you found that useful. Like I say, don't go selling all your kids' toys and betting the money on Gregor Gillespie. I am very conscious that a lot of inexperienced grapplers... Sorry, no, said it wrong. I am very conscious that a lot of inexperienced gamblers watch these YouTube videos. I could tell by the comments that some of the guys watching these YouTube videos really don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. So I always need to emphasize, when I'm recommending bets, the dangers and the risk factors. It's a fucking fantastic stylistic fight for Gregor Gillespie. This is one of the safest bets I've seen this year, one of the best value bets I've seen this year. Obviously better value at 1.53, his odds have declined now, but I still think there's value. However, value and strong positions don't automatically mean wins. Riddell's game as hell, tough as nails, cardio for days. Gregor Gillespie's reckless. There's a chance Riddell can catch him with something. It's just very, very, very unlikely. We now get into... Let's talk a little bit about the main event. Let's talk a little bit about the main... Let's talk a little bit... I need a drink before we get into this one, boys. It is warm in here. Alright. Now let's get into the main event. We're going to be talking about the fight between Derek Brunson and Kevin Holland. Now, this is an interesting one, man, because I do think this will be an interesting fight in terms of an entertaining fight, but it is a weird main event, not gonna lie. The one thing that both these fighters have in common is that they have really, really, really bad fight IQ, very, very poor decision making, and whenever you've got fighters that have fight IQ this bad, it's always kind of risky betting the fight. It's always kind of risky predicting what will happen, because both these fighters are so inconsistent. You never really know what you're going to get from him. It's like Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland's like a box of chocolates, right? You never know what you're going to get from him. Even if we just look at some of his recent fights, he went from getting absolutely dominated on the ground by a relatively low-level grappler like Brendan Allen, and getting lay and prayed in the second half of this fight by a super low-level white belt on the ground like Darren Stewart, to coping just fine on the ground and finishing Jacare on the ground, who's one of the best grapplers in the history of MMA. This guy is just fucking chaos, and you never know what you're going to get from him. So extreme caution is always required when you bet on a guy like Kevin Holland, because Holland is the kind of guy who could come out, look absolutely incredible, look better than Israel Adesanya, completely annihilate Brunson with spinning shit, flashy kicks, flying knees. Or he's the kind of guy that could just give up a weak takedown in round 1, lay on his back for 5 rounds and give up an easy decision to Brunson. This guy's chaos. You just do not know what to expect from him. And caution is definitely advised whenever you bet on Kevin Holland, basically. He's a risky dude. Having said that, when you look at Derek Brunson, there's nothing he does which I think will cause Kevin Holland a problem. He's 37 years old, which is obviously really getting up there in MMA miles. He's also had almost 30 pro fights. With Brunson, we've also seen him rocked, dropped, knocked out, wobbled a lot, which means he's taken a lot of head trauma, which means he probably can't take a shot as well as he used to. Brunson is also showing all the signs of a fighter at the tail end of his career and on a steep decline, because he just doesn't read his opponent very well. We know that when a fighter gets older, their reflexes are one of the first things that go, and you could definitely see that in Brunson. He's very slow to react. He gets caught cold and clean a lot with clean, hard shots that he just doesn't see coming that tend to stun him. And that's obviously a huge issue when you're fighting a guy like Kevin Holland that fights long, tall, and he's very, very unorthodox. He can cover distance very quickly, and he throws a lot of wild, wacky shit that is just very difficult to see coming. That makes Holland extremely dangerous for a guy like Brunson, because Brunson doesn't read, opponents like Ian Heinisch and Edmund Shabazian very well, who have very traditional styles of striking. So the probability of him being able to see the shots coming from a guy like Kevin Holland, who's much more unorthodox, is extremely unlikely. Brunson's going to struggle bad standing here. Brunson also has a low volume style of striking, and when he does throw, it tends to just be loading up on single shots. Brunson's punches also tend to fall quite short. He likes to blitz forward in straight lines and just spam that overhand right. But even though Kevin Holland is not particularly great at fighting long, and Holland's boxing is quite a low level, Holland's got a predominantly kicks-based style of striking. Because of the length, the way Holland fights very long and gangly, it will be difficult for Brunson to get into a range where he can land that big power right hand. So if the fight stays standing, I think Brunson's volume is too low to cause Holland a problem. Brunson's volume is too low to outstrike Holland. It's going to be difficult for him to get inside and land his big power right hand. And on top of that, Holland is, for all of Holland's weaknesses, he is tough as nails. We've seen him put in some bad positions. We've seen him in some wars, but he's tough as nails. He could take a shot. We've seen him fight with a dislocated shoulder against Alessio Di Chirico. Ate some big shots off Joaquin Buckley. It was a tough fight against Darren Stewart. For all of Holland's weaknesses psychologically in terms of fight IQ, Holland tough as nails. Brunson nowhere near as durable. He could definitely get caught with something crazy. My fear for Holland in this fight is his grappling, which is a crazy thing to say because obviously he dealt just fine with one of the best grapplers of all time in MMA against Jacare in his last fight. But this guy is so inconsistent with his grappling. To understand why this guy is tricky to work out from a grappling point of view, go take a look at his fight against Jacare. Then go take a look at his fight against Darren Stewart and against Brendan Allen. And it is like looking at a completely different guy. When Jacare was trying to take Holland down and hold him down, Holland was doing a really good job of using an active guard from preventing Jacare of establishing a dominant position. Was doing a great job of scrambling back up to his feet. If that version of Holland shows up this weekend, he's trouble for Derek Brunson. But then when you go and see Kevin Holland against Darren Stewart and Brendan Allen, he's giving up weak takedowns. He's got a really, really weak guard. He's, does absolutely nothing off his back. It's very, very easy for Stewart to work from top position and control him from top position. Very easy for Brendan Allen to take his back and mount him. You know, Holland looked like a white belt on the ground in his fights against, Brendan Allen and Darren Stewart, and yet coped just fine against Jacare, which is really, really weird because there's only a 3-month gap between the Jacare and the Stewart fight. Now, I know on one hand we could say, but Holland took the fight against Stewart on short notice and he complained about having injured knees against Stewart. But that doesn't make up for how bad he looked on the ground against Brendan Allen. So this guy is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get from him. He's absolute chaos and very, very difficult to predict. Based on the Jacare fight, I don't think Brunson can cause this guy any trouble with his wrestling, because Brunson, even though Brunson does have an NCAA Division 3 level background in wrestling, his offensive wrestling isn't the best. He tends to shoot takedowns pretty high above his opponent's hips and struggles to upset their balance. And even when he does take guys down, he doesn't have the heaviest top game, with Holland being quite long and tall and gangly. You know, he stands a great chance of popping back up to his feet if he does get taken down. But the thing about Holland is so often he accepts being on the bottom. Like I say, we saw him do it against Stewart. We saw him do it against Allen. And, yeah, nightmare. Absolute nightmare. So when I look at this fight, Holland is a very, very tempting bet, because I don't think Brunson's going to be able to outstrike Holland because his volume is too low. I don't think Brunson's going to be able to hurt Holland with his power right hand, because he's going to have to cover so much distance to get inside, and Holland does a really good job of just using that head movement to slip shots, and he's got a good chin. I do think Holland can hurt Brunson very, very bad with his unorthodox style of striking, because Brunson doesn't tend to see the shots come in. I don't think Brunson can cause Holland a problem with his wrestling, because his offensive wrestling is not great and his top control is not great. So Holland is a very tempting bet. And I will be taking Holland small this weekend. But it's risky because he's just a knucklehead. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if in the biggest fight of Holland's life, the first main event, this guy comes out, gives up weak takedowns, and just allows Brunson to control him from top position for long periods of time and just does absolutely nothing off his back and accepts a loss. I don't know if Holland needs to see a sports psychologist or something like that, but the guy is crazy talented, but he just doesn't have the correct mentality. He just, in so many of his fights, he makes bad decisions, which either costs him the win, results in fights ending up being closer than they need to be, or, you know, gets himself into trouble. It's a weird thing. Hopefully he turns a corner this weekend and gets a win, but it's always risky betting on Kevin Holland. So when I look at this fight, Brunson doesn't really pose much of a threat to Holland. It's a great stylistic matchup for Holland. But the biggest risk to Holland is himself. And there is a significant risk that Holland could beat himself. If we get the best version of Holland, the best version of Brunson, Holland kills Brunson. But GSP famously said the fighting was 90% mental. And that's where Holland's really lacking. So it's always risky betting on him. But it is a good stylistic matchup for him. If we look at his odds, he's currently around about a... where are we? A 1.57 favourite, which is minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. If we look at the odds on Brunson, currently around about a 2.50 underdog, which is plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. I definitely wouldn't bet Brunson here because his reflexes look shot. He's slow to react to what his opponent's doing. And like I say, Holland's very unorthodox. I think, you know, Holland's maybe worth a small bet, but it's risky as fuck. You know, it's risky. It's risky. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back on Saturday with a prop bet live stream. Hit the like button if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. And also subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the stuff I said in this video. And also, don't forget to check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. The monthly subscription fee is an absolute bargain for the quality of content you'll receive for the lab bets. It's an absolute no-brainer. If you haven't signed up already, go check it out. Anyway, I'll see you on Saturday for that live stream. thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you very